Good morning. Welcome to the second day, actually the third day of the Beta Awards weekend. My name is Alexandra Trofim. I am the director of the Biennale as a whole, but I've been also in the shoes of Anka back in 2020 when I was coordinating the Beta Awards. Anyway, now, even if I'm not super familiar with the Beta Awards and the jurors, I'm extremely happy to be your host today. I hope you are all feeling fine after yesterday. We had a very full day of events. To be honest, I am a bit struggling after the party, but anyway. Some words about the Beta Awards. As you might already know, the biennial, the Timișoara Architecture Biennial has two big components. It has the curatorial research, the exhibition that gives also the theme of the edition, Cover Me Softly This Year, curated by Oana Stănescu, which I hope you already seen in the Garrison. And then Beta Awards, which has a series of categories, which created also three groups of different jurors. Yesterday evening we listened to the presentations of the jurors from the text category, and today we are with the photography category jurors today. Dacian Groza, Francesca Iovene, and Iwan Ban. Thank you all for being here today. This category, the photography category, is a continuation of a project created by the Order of Architects at local branch called PORT, Premier Octavian Radu Topai, who was a photographer and architect, unfortunately who passed away, and we wanted to create a contest and some exhibitions on photography in his memory. And then afterwards we integrated this photography category in our Beta Awards. And we are still thinking it was a great idea because it is as important as the build categories. So another full day of events. After we finish this panel talk with the presentation of the three jurors, we will stay for a short conversation and I will ask you to engage with us. Hopefully during the day people will join more. And then in the afternoon we will have the other category jurors from the first 5 categories, the presentation, and later in the evening the Gala Awards. The ceremony of awards. Of course, later at 8 o'clock at Vila Mal, we are going to open the exhibition from Las Vegas to Rome with the photographies by Iwan Ban. And we will finish the evening again at the Garrison, just like yesterday, but with another group of DJs representing the 3 countries from Romania, Hungary, and Serbia, just like the theme of the biennial in this weekend, the Euroregional competition. I will introduce Dacian Groza, which I met yesterday, so I'm not extremely familiar with you, but it was a pleasure. Dacian Groza discovered his serious passion for photography during college. He studied architecture in Cluj, where he started documenting his architect friends project. He quickly realized that he was more interested in photography than in design, so he followed numerous photographic trips and collaborations with architects, designers, galleries, and artists. Using photography as a means of expression, his interests range from artistic projects to documented architecture. He currently explores the city, society, and life in general through photography. Coming from Berlin and Cluj, living between the cities, welcome, and I give you the mic.
please bear with me. I'm not used to this presentation style. Okay. All right. So, I'm from Zalău, studied in Cluj, and my interests range between these two topics, architecture and photography, but strongly tilted towards photography. I never actually worked as an architect. I started taking photos directly after finishing school a number of years ago. And the profession of an architect or photographer kind of fits inside my occupation as a photographer. That's kind of like a lifestyle for me. I don't know why, but I always feel the need to take photos. So yeah, it's basically a discovery. I always have to do something when I'm somewhere. I like to travel and discover the world and experience new places, and I think for me that's the point of seeing what came before and visiting new places and just being there. And that's kind of my approach to architectural photography. It's not a comprehensive view of a building, it's more of like transmitting the feeling of being somewhere. And this is how it started for me in Cluj. This type of photo, my obsession with Dacia cars, that you don't see so much anymore. This is maybe, I'm gonna say 15 years ago. Also, a park in Cluj that looks much better now. But yeah, for me, architecture is a setting, right? Exploring your environment, and it's around the same time. And you know, serendipity, strange encounters, compositions that just happen, all on the background of this type of city that I grew up in. And like probably some of you here, you're very familiar with this type of building. And for me, this is kind of home. At the same time, I started taking photos for designers. In this case, it's an interior, a bar. Just exploring the city. It's kind of strange how I got this feeling that in Romania the indoors don't quite match the outdoors. Like if you look at these pictures of private areas, you wouldn't know that stepping outside you'd see that other world. But yeah, this contrast for me this is something that kind of guides me in the way I look at things. So yeah, after a few years in Cluj, I moved to Berlin, pretty much on a whim, just to explore. And it was supposed to be for 3 months, to see what it's like, and now 9 years later I'm still there. And it's a great base, it's a great city to be in and to explore it, but it's also a great base to visit the rest of the world from. So yeah, moved from taking this type of photo, like a Dallas neighborhood in an old mine town in Romania, to this type of picture, which is in Berlin. So yeah, not too much of a difference. I guess it follows me around. My interest follows me around all the time. But yeah, taking photos of large developments. And this is something that I wanna focus on today, more like the passion of photography and then the commercial aspect of it. And just to show you some things that drew me wherever I was. So this is kind of where it all began when it comes to this type of building. In Berlin in 1957, the Interbau exhibition was where the modern concrete or modern material apartment building was first presented, and then it kind of spread all over the world. And for me, going to Berlin, this was one of the first things that attracted me, and I wanted to see it. Same thing, but from a distance, from a hill that's built from the rubble of old Berlin. Berlin is normally flat, but now it has a couple of so-called mountains made out of rubble. So yeah, the new built on top of the old. And a parallel between my new experience on the left with the Corbusier house and maybe a cover from the neighborhood of Gheorgheni in Cluj that I took years before. So yeah, we definitely see this type of mirroring over history, and yeah, it's something that's really attractive to me. Different type of cover now. In Berlin, an apartment building on top of a World War II bunker. So yeah, we kind of keep the old and adapt over it, but the idea kind of lives on, and just exploring, I kind of observed also this building that's also a different type of bunker. It's a so-called bunker by the general public. It's a mouse bunker. It's a research facility of a university, so they test they do genetic tests, I guess, on animals. So yeah, my kind of tourist attraction, because I'm talking now a bit also as a tourist. Moving on to newer things. This is one of the first buildings I photographed when I got to Berlin, and it's the Futurium Museum. It's a museum of the future built by Richter Musikowski Architects, which is an office from Berlin. And I started photographing it on my own, and then it became my first commission in Berlin. I developed a relationship with architects, and it was really, really cool to explore. This is before it started to operate as a museum, so yeah, it's before it was open. And for Berlin, I think it's an outstanding building, because Berlin is kind of uniform in its architecture, and I really appreciate this. I really appreciate this courage, like they have in other cities, but when it comes to Berlin, I love it. Another public building, because I'm really focusing on public buildings now, and kind of feeling the atmosphere there. And I really like the revisit value of some of these buildings. Like for me, a big plus of choosing where to live is what you can experience every day, and what you can experience in every season, and just going somewhere to see how the light changes, how the new interacts with the old, and how just materials and shadow play. Yeah. So I just pick up my camera and start walking, and I discover something new in a place that I've been many times before. Another one where it started, like the Corbusier house, this is, of course, the Mies van der Rohe building, and it was actually the first one in the international style that was invented in Berlin. It was built in '68, much later than it was designed. But for me, coming from Romania and learning about this, it was something that I really wanted to see. So it was under renovation for a long time, and it opened a few years ago. And it's an amazing space, like really cool materials, really cool proportions, and it's a it's a great spot to photograph. But what I really like about it is how it kind of turned from an attraction to a background for life, and how I really appreciate how people start using this place that's like a sacred space for architects, and it's just a stage. So moving on to a project that has very little to do with architecture, like proper architecture. So I was asking myself, like, what's the point of like going somewhere to photograph an object? And here I kind of turned the route itself, you know, like the walk itself into the purpose. So yeah, since I take every opportunity to travel, when I had the opportunity to go to Tokyo, I discovered that they have this train line that goes in a circle around the city, or around the city center. And somebody told me, like on the last day I was there, that you can actually walk around the tracks on the nearest roads, and you can do it in 12 hours. It's a bit over 40 kilometers. So yeah, it's a trek. It's a way to kind of go somewhere but not go anywhere, but you end up in the same place. And I really wanted to make a portrait of the city that's random, because you never know. You have to hurry, and you never know how you know what you're going to see. And I went back to actually photograph it, and I took the photograph over a few days. Yeah, I'm going to show you some of them. Like a problem with visiting a big city like Tokyo is that you have your landmarks that you want to see, but when you get there, it's full of photographers, and you've seen the pictures before. And to me, sometimes it's a disappointment that I'm there and it's like I've been there before. So in this case, I'm just looking at the city and some sites that I have no idea what they're going to be, and probably nobody else focused on doing that exact thing. And you know, just random things that you see, like even in a huge city like that, at night it's very quiet. You see one or two people every once and again. It's after 10 o'clock, after the rush hour and after the happy hour at the bars, people practically go home and it's empty, it's completely empty. The reason why I took these pictures at night is that it was really, really hot, and you couldn't really do anything during the day. You couldn't be out in the open. So that was also a random thing that directed the way this project came to and ended up looking. So there's a strange stillness even in such a huge city. The way I approached it, like, this is a tripod shot, but it's one of the very few, maybe two in the whole project. You see the moving lights from the car as well. It became too cumbersome to carry the tripod in that heat, and I ended up going out with just one 13.5mm lens and one camera, and I just used that. Met some people too, and yeah, that's a photo of the actual train that goes through on the tracks, and it was very interesting that inside the train it was bustling, it was full of people, but where I was, there was absolute stillness. And yeah, another thing that really attracted me was this. That's an entrance to one of the stations, like a back alley entrance, and a back window of a restaurant that was closing. And yeah, just seeing this type of thing in a very strange place yeah, is worth it to me, and it's what I kind of chase. Yeah, that's about it, and I want to end on a lighter note, thinking about the future of photography. I don't know what it holds. There's one building on the left that's in Berlin, the International Congress Center from the 70s. It's an amazing building that I live very close to it, and I visit it all the time, and again, it's like a spaceship. Lots of movies were filmed there, and it's just a pleasure to be in. And the one is the equivalent in Kyoto in Japan. And I thought I'd fit them to Midjourney and see what new buildings come out of it. And it's very, I don't even know what to think about it, but yeah, there's a lot where that came from. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens with photography in the future. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Dacian. We can discuss more afterwards together. Thank you so much for breaking the ice in this morning. I will introduce you to Francesca Iovene, the next juror in this category. A photographer based in Milan now, in Italy. She graduated Architecture Politecnico di Milano, and she lived in Valparaiso in Chile and also in Berlin in Germany. Her projects have been exhibited at the Milan Triennale, Foundation of Milan Order of Architects, and Bergamo Brescia Capital of Culture. She collaborates with various publishing houses, and her images are regularly published in major architecture magazines. She has also worked for the Italian Ministry of Culture and was a member of the jury at Architecture Film Award. She investigates the relationship between human vision, memory, and anthropological spaces, combining photographic practice with architecture research. Thank you for being today with us, Francesca.
I use this Alex. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Hi. Hi everybody, I'm Francesca. I'm an Italian photographer, and now I'm living in Milan. After Alexander said in my presentation, I live in Chile and in Berlin for the last 4 years. Now I move again in Milan. I didn't know what to present today at the beginning because always when I think about my work, I really don't know what to put before, if there is a hierarchy or something like that. So then I think about that. The topic also of beta, and then I found something to discuss. I think that in a lot of to call me and other colleagues architectural photographer nowadays is a bit old school maybe, because I think that now our way of seeing the world changed a lot. I think it's too strict to say architectural photographer, so for that reason I usually call myself just a photographer with an architectural background. I think it's more proper. And I put this first quote of Luigi Ghirri, that it's an Italian photographer that I like very much. It's a very important one of our photographic tradition, but also in general internationally, that I think that can summarize very well what I think about photography and what I think about seeing the world. Because I think that we always photograph something that we already seen in some way. So I think photography like a constant research or familiar or something that
can be reproduced to home or homeland. This is my point of view. So I try to divide more or less the things I do, but knowing that there is not such a big difference, that it's a topic that I really care about, because I try always to photograph for assignments in the same way I would photograph, of course, for myself. So the first project I wanted to show, it's an assignment from the Italian Ministry of Culture that I did 2 years ago, because the ministry wanted to, how do I say? They need to make a list of cultural heritage of some part of the south of Italy that were still not so discovered, not so known. And so they select like 15 photographers to do that, but in an authorial way. So, okay, you have to research architecture and site and things with a value. You make a list, and you photograph that in your own way. So we need some photograph of it, but you can try to understand what to do with this photograph. So it was a challenge to photograph all the sites, but telling something more than just descriptive images of the church, of the landscape, and just trying to learn the atmosphere of the place, a place that I didn't know so well, because it is a region of the south of Italy, Calabria, that I don't know very well. So for that reason, I concentrate a lot on human presence also without humans. For me, the picture on the right is very Italian also, because it was summer, it was very hot, and the church was full of gold stuff, and that's their ventilator. I don't know. It's funny for me. And so I continue this research. Of course, now I select just some images that represent my point of view, and not also the super descriptive images that I gave them. But I just needed to show them and show to myself. I think the urgency was to try to search for some familiarity and atmosphere in all the place I was discovering. So from the sacrestia, so the back of the church, with the chair and this kind of old bridge in the city center. So I always try to do analogies and to try to understand the place from ordinary visions. So more or less like this. And I always try to find a good light to do that. It's, of course, any photographer, I think, has a personal light they want to use. And yes, I discovered also that my obsession are chairs, but I think it's because that place is full of chairs, I think it's a very human thing. So for that reason, I didn't feel the urgency to photograph people, but I think the human presence is still very there. Also, there is another project that it's that has the same attitude, more or less. That is it turns into a book. So this researcher with a good friend of mine, that is a PhD architect, that wanted to do a monography about an architect not well known in Italy of the last century. The name of the architect is Robaldo Morozzo della Rocca, it's a huge name, and he named the research and the book Experimental Attitude, because this architect merged a lot classicism and modernism in his research. And I did a lot of image for him, like photograph for him, for the PhD thesis. Also very descriptive one because he needed in a more like scientific way, let's say. But then when we decided to do a monography with a Swiss publishing house, I say to him, okay, but now I will decide which photograph we put inside the book, the more like narrative ones, I think, because now the monography can be more like less academic and more personal. So I wanted to decide more about the photography we will put inside the book. So, for example, the photo on the right is the cover of the book that I choose because, I don't know, for one reason maybe it's a bit commercial in this way, so people always, if they see animals, I think they always are attracted to cats and dogs, something like that. And also I choose this kind of images, so more intimate, and do some diptychs to make understand better the soul of the architect, because you see it's a very different size. And we did all, for years we went in Genova, in Liguria, region of Italy. It's very peculiar to research all of his architecture, because also he was an architect also for like more housing like that, but also like super fancy buildings. For example, this. The funny story is also that you can see that in this crazy building there is a flag of football, a football flag, I don't know. And the architect, my friend, say like, what should we do? We remove it because maybe it's a bit strange in a publication to see something like a bit disturbing. And I say no, we don't remove it because I think it's very real. And if you want to do a project about an architect and his legacy, I think you have to see how people live in these buildings now. So for that reason, then also we had the luck to enter in the same apartment, so you see the flag also there. So I think it's like representing architecture now, it's always a matter to domesticity, like this is my point of view. This is another architecture by him. This is very huge project. And this is another one. And another thing I wanted to say about the photo on the right, that before we discuss a bit with Alexandra at that point. This photo on the right, I put it on Instagram some time ago, and it became a bit viral. I don't know, maybe because it's very aesthetical, maybe because the stairs is very nice, I don't know. Sometimes Instagram works in a sense that I don't understand. And so the architect said to me, well, we have to put it like the cover of the book because it's like too important. Now every person, people will recognize your photo and the project and the book in this way. But I was not sure about that because I think that I wanted to contrast a bit this kind of this kind of situation that Instagram creates sometimes. And so in the end, with a lot of arguments, I managed to use the other one. Yes, I really like these photos, but I think that sometimes it's like the images, the architecture inside the photos and the photos are two different things, and Instagram sometimes merge too much this kind of line. These are other photos of the projects. And this is the output that we released 1 month ago that I'm very happy because it's like my first monography. Like it's not my book, but still it's a huge thing for me. And the other assignment, the third assignment that has more or less this the same way of approaching photography and assignment in a personal way is for the Order of Architects in Milan. They need to make a book because they have a series of books about architecture in Milan, Milanese architecture, and they select me for this book, the 10th book, that it was about universities and Milanese campuses, and I thought that was like a bit hard because they wanted not just to show the architecture of the campus, but the life in the campus. So I had to deal with people this time, like real people that moves around, and I don't do it very much, so it was a challenge. So this is two different universities in Milan, and it was nice to try to understand when to go to the campuses, because when people are there, how students live, and also merge it with my necessity to use a certain kind of light, because I don't like, I don't know, the midday kind of light, so I try to merge this two kind of thing. For this reason, I think that I went to the university a lot of times, different times, because I became a little obsession about when I had to do a photography research like this. I become a bit obsessed by the light, by this kind of thing. So I need to put it like a lot of effort. And it doesn't matter like how much money they cover, like the cover me. It's like I need to do a good job, and that's it. I choose how much time I want to spend on this project. So, yeah, this is the Politecnico di Milano, where I studied. And yeah, this is the kind of things I was dealing with. And this is the output as well, the book and a little exhibition of the architects. Now, some photos about my, not the personal research, but the assignments, because I was trying to figure out which photos represent me most. Meanwhile, they are not for, like, they are just assignments. So I was trying to put some images that can reveal my way of dealing with the architecture and the vision of the architecture, like it was a personal project like before. Like, for me, it's the same way. So this is Rome. This is Varosizza in Italy, near Milan. And all these projects were commissioned. So this is England or Paris. So I always try to be a bit, I think, intimate when I shoot the project, and I always try to be like myself, because I think it's nice when they call you because you is you are you, and not just because you, I don't know, cost less of other people, or you're near, or you are known for something else. And after that, the second part is the very personal research. And more like landscape. And this is why I think that architectural photographer is a bit reductive, because I think a photographer is enough sometimes. So this was a little project I had to do for this art residency in Italy, so to try to tell about this little town in the center of Italy, in the Marche region. And I try to find analogies between shapes and things that I have in mind. And also this photo on the left, it was the first photo I did when I arrived at the residency. That is a very dear photo to me because this chair is, I noticed that this chair is also a chair of my parents' house where I grew up. So for me the theme of the residency was to try to find my own home in another place, I don't know. No, I always try to do that more or less, like try to take, to search for some familiarity, like, you know, say that. Familiarity. Okay, I don't know. Sorry. And chairs again, because I don't know, it's a thing, like I said before. Or maybe because I think that it's like the super simple example of what a person can build also alone. And it doesn't matter the shape that they are, you always can understand that is a chair. So it's a very super familiar thing. And on the left you see Elviro, that is the name of the project. We choose a proper name, Italian name, not so used anymore, because I remember that in the residency, me and the other photographers, I'm quite ignorant on plants, unfortunately, we didn't know the name of the tree. It's a maple, like very simple, but so we decided to call him Elviro, just for joke. And so I like to, I thought that it's a good thing to call the project like this, because it's the same way of thinking about the chairs and the thing that you are familiar with. So it doesn't, it's not important the name of the town or where you are, but what you recognize. You always like recognize the thing you're seeing, and you can make it personal. This was the exhibition after the residency. Then another little part of personal research. I think that was like I was super out of my comfort zone because I'm a super city person. I grew up in a city and I live always in cities. But when I was in Chile, I discovered this part of the Atacama Desert that is now it's more known, also because other photographers that I really like made a lot of projects about that. Some years ago, like this is the less touristic part of the Atacama Desert. There are like this kind of little towns and like abandoned coal mine and saltpeter mine. Chile was really like powerful before with this mine, and now they are abandoned because now the saltpeter is artificial, so they didn't need anymore. And also in this case, I was trying to find something like familiar or let's say vision that were like very new to me, but in a certain sense, I was trying to find like a deja vu. I don't know. Unfortunately, it's a project that for now is on standby because after COVID I didn't go to Chile again, but maybe one day I will continue it, I don't know. And to conclude, there's another ongoing project that I don't know if it's a project still, because sometimes I just photograph and then we'll see. A bit more like Luigi Ghirri also did this thing, the photographer of before. He did a lot of photograph about a lot of different things without like built directly a project, and then he put together the images and do the editing after a while. And I think it's a good method also because if you are always you that photograph the things you like, at the end you will find a pattern or a fil rouge in your work. So even if I'm in Milan again, I go back and forth Berlin sometimes because I miss it, I have friends there, and so I start to photograph what I like simply use that. Try to find analogy also here. I'm a bit obsessed also in Berlin with this kind of empty facade, like also here I noticed some of them, and in other part of the world, more Mediterranean, I have to say, but I think that Berlin is like the most Mediterranean city in the north of Europe. It's a thing that I really like to think. And but the thing is that when I was digging in my archive, at the end I noticed that there were some similarities from Berlin to Milan, not in the sense of architecture, of course, because they are very different, but maybe the similarities are like seen by me. For example, in the left there is Berlin and in the right is Milan. Also here, there are like two famous buildings, like super different architecture, but then I'm starting to put together different cities now and see what happens, because always because they are home to me in some way, so I have a romantic vision of photography, let's say like this. I like to say this. Maybe I stole the word from Alex Sott, that's a photographer that I really like. Yeah, because simply I think that photography always represents yourself more than, for me at least, more myself than the building I'm photographing. Like the building is like a medium to express myself. It's never the final destination. And I always try to think about that, or also when I photograph for other architects, like, and try to merge, of course, their needs with my needs. So, more or less, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Francesca. It was beautiful to see these personal approaches that you have. Thank you for sharing that. And I think you made a nice transition by closing with this comparison of putting cities together, that we can go now to Iwan's work. First of all, I want to say that Iwan has multiple roles in the Biennale, actually, because he's also a contributor in the exhibition, Cover Me Softly. You can see his work on the Walter Guest House at the Garrison. I think your path and Juana's, Danescu's path, have already crossed a couple of times, also with Architecture for Humanity a couple of years ago, so it is not, I think it came naturally to have you here this year. So Iwan is a Dutch photographer who you might already be familiar with his work. He's based between Amsterdam and the US, known primarily for images that narrate the life and interactions that occur within architecture. With no formal training in architecture, Iwan's photographs reflect the questions and perspectives of the everyday individuals who give meaning and context to the architecture and spaces that surround us. His artistic approach has given matters of architecture an approachable and accessible voice. In 2012, he received the Golden Lion at the Venice Biennale for his work on the Torre Davide in Caracas, in Venezuela, gaining him further international acclaim. Architects turn to Iwan's work to give their work a sense of place and narrative within their environments. Last but not least, do not forget that this evening at 8 o'clock at Villa Mar, we are opening the exhibition From Las Vegas to Rome, and we are very, very happy and honored to have it in this Biennale. Welcome, and thank you for being here with us.
Thank you all for coming on an early Saturday morning here. It's really nice to be here for the first time in Timisoara, and I'm looking forward to see the show and Biennale and everything. So let me see. Yes, there it is. So I thought I'll show you a little bit like how I came into this architectural field. It was in 2004, 2005 that I met, kind of by coincidence, Rem Koolhaas. I was, before doing more documentary photography, I've been, since a teenager, basically always had a camera on my side. I studied in art school photography, did more documentary work, and then kind of by coincidence I met Rem Koolhaas at this particular moment where there were a number of interesting projects from the office finishing, and this project was starting the construction of the CCTV towers in Beijing. I was fascinated by kind of the context, what was happening in Beijing at that time, sort of the whole run-up to the Olympic Games, and I proposed him to start documenting like the construction. I thought that could be a nice excuse to be more there in Beijing, and like a lot of other things sort of uncovered from there. Like it was, yeah, a piece of architecture where from the very first beginning you kind of feel like what it is going to be. It's all structure basically. It's all, yeah, from its very first moment of inception, you feel kind of what's coming there. At the same time, like it was a project like almost built by hand. Like at moments there were like almost 10,000 construction workers there on site, living on site. There were mainly migrant workers coming from the countryside to the big city, kind of for the first time, living there on site. You have this massive building going up, at the same time like a city around it which is in a rapid change, and like all these sort of forces coming together. It was totally fascinating to see that over a number of years. And it's like, yeah, not just architecture, it's like people living in the city, people being displaced, people building the city, building this piece of architecture, living in there, having sort of all their daily rituals, and then in the background going up this massive building. So that became, yeah, as architecture often happens, like, yeah, it just takes 2 or 3 years, and then that's up there. It became a project which took years and years, and I actually was back with Rem just a few months ago, where like the smaller building of the two, which was heavily damaged during a fire in 2009, just before the opening, which is kind of now, yeah, more or less finished, but still stood empty. So you're talking about almost 20 years where it's still sort of an ongoing project. For me, that art, like photography, is always sort of an excuse to stick your nose in places where you don't really belong to, and especially like everything what was happening in China around that time, sort of like the massive modernization in China happening everywhere in the countryside. It's architecture, but also like people, kind of the traditional buildings and everything. This whole clash of things happening. So from there, like a lot of other architects started approaching me. I started working with them. Herzog and de Meuron have followed kind of a similar path by documenting the construction of the Olympic Stadium. Another one of those massive projects, like where, yeah, it's architecture, it's this building, but it's also like these migrant workers, people coming from the countryside, living on a construction site and building these kind of things almost by hand. For me, it's always important to step away just from like these kind of details of a building, like kind of for my own sanity, almost like you're always transported to a place where which is totally unfamiliar, which you try to make sense of, where you step away from its building, like see the larger context, like what's happening around it, what people do there, like from projects here in Japan. This is Nishizawa, a small museum he did in the north of Japan, where like all these kind of strange things come together in totally unexpected ways. Yeah, Japan is always a great inspiration of its kind of improbable living conditions, how people build places, the experimental nature of architecture, and yeah, it's sort of perfection in everything. This is, for instance, in Naoshima, this art island in the Japanese inland sea, where yeah, there's all these great Tadao Ando buildings, fantastic public artworks everywhere in the landscape. But then you come also across moments like these where yeah, it's totally random. Like this boy started kissing the Nikita Falls statue, and then this woman almost in a similar dress. Like, oh, it's all coming together, and it's really about sort of these particular moments you try to capture. And let me, the Toyo Ito here in different settings. This is the Taichung Performing Arts Center, which he did in Taiwan. But like again, you step back from it and you see this completely generic context where kind of his curves start to pop out. So Toscano, another, the Spanish office have been collaborating for a long time. It's extremely colorful work, something very different than what you usually come across, and in sometimes very different conditions. Here in Kenya, where I collaborate also with them, building a small school in Nairobi in one of the large slums. Zaha Hadid, of course, but again, like stepping away from it, seeing it in the context of Baku and the city, and that huge contrast between its architecture and an existing city. Sometimes it's these collaborations with artists, like Oliver Eliasson here in Qatar, Christo sort of observing his lifelong dream. It's the Mastaba, which was finally built at the Serpentine Gallery in London, and that kind of first approach he has to his project. I see him with the project behind it and all these kind of things coming together. It's almost like his shadow is projected there on the artwork. OMA in different settings here, also in Qatar, this beautiful library he did there. And then again, like kind of removing yourself from the subject, seeing it much more in the context of the city, how sort of all these layers of the city, the project, the context, the atmospheric conditions kind of all come together. And also sometimes the absurdity of these projects. Here, Dubai with the tallest tower in the world, but then you see also like it's all desert, there's like very little there, and it's just that one row of high rises. Then this one building in the middle of it, which is like, yeah, this is the biggest, tallest building in the world. And I think like these aerial perspectives, they always give a very particular patina and a kind of like a soul of a city, I think they give away. Caracas here with its endless hills draped with the informal housing. Kyoto here with the large imperial palace and gardens and the sort of incredible pixelation of a city. Hong Kong with all its high rises. Tokyo with the waterways and highways which are often covered waterways, so it gives this completely organic feel of a city. And Los Angeles, like again, like its incredible grid with the highways. Miami here, like laying just like inches above the sea level, and also like that fragility of these kind of places, which you can reveal in moments like that. New York, which I photographed many times over the years, from the air, from the ground, for different projects, which was for a long time my home also. And then there's also these kind of things you cannot plan for, and often like my photography, like there's very little to plan for. It's really sort of catching that moment. But here, this was 12 years ago in 2012, where this massive storm came over New York, shut the power out for like 6 days, and yeah, kind of moment which is not easy to capture. Like there's no electricity. It's a kind of an event of like there was not much destruction or so, but you live in a major world city center without electricity for 6 days. So it's one of those rare moments where everything comes together. I just received, like, it was at that time like the most sensitive new camera, like 2 weeks before, and I realized that it's a moment you can only capture from above, like a city without electricity, in pure darkness, photography which needs light. So that was another one of those shots I took from the helicopter, showing that contrast of the darkened space without electricity, and the rest of the city that became like this sort of iconic image of the city of New York, and still keeps going around the world. So these kind of cities are for me always fascinating. Like, of course, architecture, like, is sort of my commissions, which bring me around the world to many different places, but to see how cities grow, how people live in these kind of places, for me that's always fascinating. This was a book I did in 2010 on Brasilia and Chandigarh. These two cities at the time were 50 and 60 years old. Of course, both conceived by architects Le Corbusier and Oscar Niemeyer. And kind of revisiting these places and see how they changed over time, how people live in these kind of places, how they take them over, like long after architects left, and how architecture still influences, of course, very much living in that kind of place. Here's the architecture school in Chandigarh. People living in these kind of places, taking them over, living in every nook and cranny of these kind of places. Here we're in Brasilia, the aerial shot where you really see Oscar Niemeyer's idea of the large wing span, and the central axis of all the government buildings, and how they're taken over, how people like these kind of plazas in the afternoons, or like in the midday where it's scorching hot and they're only sort of covered by the pigeons and the tourists. And it's like, that architecture gives a kind of framework for people to live in and take them over and be part of that place. And then also, just seeing and capturing it in whatever kind of condition. I think great architecture looks great under any kind of condition. It doesn't have to be like the perfect sunset, the perfect time of the day, but like it reveals another quality, like the pouring rain, the people sort of hiding under that little canopy of the walkway, and that guy running completely drenched in the rain. I want to end here with another kind of comparison between two cities, Rome and Las Vegas, and you'll see the exhibition tonight we're opening here. This was about 2 years ago. I got a call kind of completely out of the blue. I was in Las Vegas for a stopover. I'm always fascinated with that kind of place, and whenever I have a chance to be somewhere close there, I usually spend a day or so there. I was walking around there. I got a call from the American Academy in Rome. We're finally opening our galleries after COVID, and do you have something which is ready, which we can show there in the gallery? But they warned me, like, it's Italy, and Italians, they love to see Italy, so it should be like a kind of Italian subject. I said, like, I don't really have anything in Italy, but I'm standing here in front of the Caesar's Palace, and maybe we can do something with that image of Italy in abroad. So then, like, when we were discussing, like, we realized it's actually 50 years ago that the book Learning from Las Vegas was published. by Denise Scott-Brown and Robert Venturi. So, and which started also at the American Academy in Rome. So we decided to do a new look at these two cities, how they changed over time, what people do in these kind of places. So I set out and I spent a while in Rome to document the city there from the ground, from above, this amazing aerial perspectives where you suddenly put all these different icons and the whole city and its city grid in a kind of context. It was one of the hottest summers of record, like people sort of drenched in sweat, the tourists which all have to do their sort of bucket list of pictures of places. Here you're like right under the Vatican, and this very historic place, but it's just a food and beverage area, which is like covered with all its wallpapers from the beauties outside. Like it could be anywhere, like you could be in Las Vegas as well. It doesn't matter so much. Everything is like sweating, dripping, water, and so on. The Trevi fountain, seeing it from above, actually you realize it's not so different from Las Vegas. It's another like very thin veneer kind of pasted against the building, which it creates like this big imposing structure where all the tourists flock to sit on, rest, eating their dripping ice cream and so on. You have all its amazing monuments where people rest in the shade. And yeah, trying to give this kind of portrait of a city, how a place like that is used and taken over by tourists. Like a place like Rome where you can have very little outdoor advertising, but then like Valentino can stage a massive runway fashion show like right on the Spanish Steps, or like buildings which are covered in construction fencing, like they can show its advertising, so that becomes kind of this massive billboard, and of course that construction then takes forever, so that's the way to sort of show a building that's in a kind of Las Vegas sense in Rome. And that kind of incredible patina of the city, the brick, the colors of the late sunset, it gives a very particular patina on that city. Whereas here in Las Vegas, you have that incredible grid again, of course, of the city with the strip where all the major buildings are in line. Again, a complete story about mass tourism, how these places are taken over, and that kind of clash of all these different cultures there. The wedding chapels, the Caesar's Palace with the homeless people kind of sitting in front of it, and that's a huge contrast of all these different worlds and realities for people. The Elvis impersonators, like right in front of the airport where you arrive to tourists here. The New York scene in the background, like everything is out of proportion, out of scale, clashing together, all these different cultures, places, like you can be anywhere basically. And it's all set in this like strange, empty land of desert with all its sort of artificial green everywhere, from the people kind of dressed up to a green tree. And its golf course is like in the middle of the desert, enormous water consumption, of course, in a place like that, which is completely unsustainable, to like these sort of massive artificial gardens here in the Bellagio, which like attract also like a very particular demographic, like somehow like all the people there were dressed like that, like you step into another kind of flowery world with its tourists there. To hear the Caesar's Palace with its all its references, of course, to the Roman Empire. And like this feeling of that, like everything becomes larger and larger, like it's a sort of endless repetition of spaces, and it's like you walk almost in a computer game with its kind of mapping floors which continue repetitions like everywhere, ceilings, walls, and also all the sort of is printed references and fabrics and so on, which continue over and over again. And then of course, yeah, the references to Rome, the columns, the people, the exhaustion of people, like going to all these kind of places. But then of course there still needs to be some convenience. There should be like the USB plug where you can charge your phone and do your Instagram pictures. And again, like here from above, from further away, where you see the strip, like you look all the way down from the strip, you see the whole world basically condensed, like from the pyramids, New York, Paris, Rome, everything is compressed in that one sort of facade, and that thin veneer, that thin facade, like you see here in the front also on the hotels, like how they all cover and try to be more than they actually are. And the whole is kind of scaleless nature of these kind of places. And then like the backside of these places, sort of endless parking lots, endless infrastructure, air conditioning, like it's all about that first facade. And of course the place is big, like you cannot design everything, but it's all this clash of different moments. With little piece of facade which is like right there where you can sort of walk into your parking lot, and for the rest, yeah, it doesn't really matter what kind of other air conditioning and infrastructure is all around there. All the other shops, so the homeless people living under the highways, like next to the Trump Tower, and it's everywhere, like massive contrast, like the sort of endless concrete wasteland, but then like Trump Tower is of course all clad in gold, and it's sort of reflection of the gold in the concrete is this whole different world. Long covered shopping malls, and then of course nowadays you have the sphere, the largest spherical structure, blah blah blah, in the world, and that's sort of now the big tourist attraction. It's this massive sphere which is inside and outside covered with LEDs, can basically be anything you want, can project any kind of world you want. This massive project cost $2.5 billion or so to build, and it sits there right in the city center. It has all day long kind of this mix of advertising, art projects, whatever kind of images and so on are projected on there, and that became kind of this new centerpiece of the city. Can you imagine living there in your house? You have this massive thing there blasting day and night over you, and it's again like that whole world is starting to become almost a computer game where it's it can be anything, you can be anywhere. It just really doesn't matter anymore where you are. Once you move to the outskirts of the city, sort of it's endless housing, low-rise housing for people who live there. Like of course there's a massive influx all the time of tourists, but at the same time it's one of the fastest growing cities in the US, with its endless suburban communities. And when you move further and further out there, like it's you see that line of light of the strip with again like the big globe, the sphere there lighting up in there, but it's sitting there in the desert in the this one piece. So this exhibition happened about almost 2 years ago now. We just released a book on the exhibition. Of course, we put together in a record time. Like there was not really time to make a publication. I always wanted to do that. So the publication became also like this whole sort of mirror image, putting these two cities together. Like we bound it also in a way that it's all basically one big stack of papers where you move back and forth between the two places, and the first and last 10 pages of the book are these juxtapositions of these two cities, where at some point you don't really know anymore where you are, like it could be all the same. And I think that's something we see more and more everywhere around us in the world, that like these places start to merge, and these kind of experiences tourists and people have in all these places start to merge more and more. And it's then all these kind of coincidences, like you find, like after you've been photographing in these places for a while, that suddenly literally all these kind of places start to merge together, like even perspectives and places, like it's completely unintentional, but once you start working on a book, getting all that material together, making connections, you see that these places actually really become almost the same, except for a few thousand years apart. Like Rome, the piazzas in Las Vegas, they become these large covered shopping malls and so on. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was great listening to your presentation. We will take a 5 minutes break just to set up the stage, and then we will continue with the conversation. So meet you back again soon. Hello again, I think we can start the conversation. I will invite Francesca and Dacian to join me and Iwan on the stage. First of all, thank you so much for being today with us, for offering this super interesting presentations of your work and your experience. Thank you all for joining, and I'm sorry that we are not in a bigger crowd, but of course I understand that it's Saturday morning and it's also a very full program in the biennial. But I'm sure that people will gather later in the day so we can continue informal conversations. We were discussing also a little bit earlier, I think the profession of architecture photography, or whatever photography with architecture background, is something that is evolving so quickly and is gaining so much power and so much importance in our field. At least what I want to start with is how I see in our work in the biennial the importance of documenting everything that we do, since it is temporary. And so if we do not document it properly, the risk is that it is never there. I am curious, or at least what I saw in your presentation is that you are looking, all of you, into experiences or temporary scenarios of a space, even if the building or the background is all maybe permanent. And I am curious, how do you relate to this, capturing the ephemeral, capturing the temporary in your work?
For me, I kind of feel that the photography is the ephemeral part, and I feel like what we're capturing is forever. I don't know why, but I always think that a photo can be retaken, even if it's different, even if it shows something else, but it's still not real, it's just an idea. And it can inspire something real for sure, but yeah, I mean, I think that I'm looking at real things through the camera. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, sorry. I think for me, like, photography was always about like capturing very specific moments and like people doing places and how people live under very different conditions, all these sort of things which are absolutely not permanent, which are like really happening in the moment. So for me it was also interesting when I fell into the whole architecture field, like architecture is kind of the opposite in a way from that. It's all about sort of permanence or perceived permanence. And architecture photography used to be also very much that, like it's sort of removed from people or from that notion of time, and this kind of timeless image. And I think for me it was always very important to put it in a very specific time, in a very specific moment, in a very specific context and so on. So that's it becomes also more of a story in its sense, why I'm there, why the building is there, why are these people there, and sort of all these kind of questions you ask yourself.
It's okay. Yeah. For me, it's like I think all three like represent architecture. We like specific moment, but with different purpose. So it's like we are connected in a way, but with different fields of sensation, let's say. And for me, it's pretty the same. I want to choose a moment that maybe it's that specific moment of the architecture, but also can be universal, because I think everybody experiences the architecture in a different way, but also in the same way. It's like repetition and differences, like it's like the combination of these two, they are like on the same page. Like when you repeat a photo of the same thing a lot of times, for example, with the repetition you can see the difference, and for me that is also real for the specific moment you took the picture, and what do you feel when you look at the picture. But maybe it's same or different from the people who took the pictures. Like, I don't know if it makes sense.
You mentioned Rio. Starting from here, how do you, how much effort do you put into the editing of the work that you do in the post-production of the photography? Or how do you work with this idea of showing the reality that you find? Of course, I've seen in your presentation, and I appreciate that a lot, but how do you, maybe in your more commercial, in the commissions that you receive, maybe there is a need to beautify some aspects of the reality of the building, of the spaces that you cover. How do you work with that?
Okay. There are like, I think, two different things. One is like Photoshop, for example, so you can remove element of that is disturbing the images when we speak about commercials. Sometimes architects are like annoyed by the cars or the pipes or whatever. But I think that I prefer to keep those things because I think they are reality. But also, you can beautify building like not with Photoshop or removing or not the things, but like he said before, it's already photography is already an interpretation, so you can beautify or mortify something with just your point of view without Photoshop. So there are like two different things for me, no?
By the frame or the selection that
yes,
you choose to show.
The light, the frame. But as everyone said before, also that caught my attention, that if a building is beautiful, also in the rain is like you can catch it and it's still beautiful. But it depends also from your point of view, where you put the camera, what you can express and live without the frame and inside the frame. So.
So if something is distracting, that you decide why it's distracting. I mean, for some purpose, if it's not a problem. But okay. Even the frame is an edit, I think. So yeah, it's a very fine line and a very broad spectrum of possibilities. So personally, I don't exclude anything, but I try to be as true to to reality, if you can call it reality, as possible. But it's more like the vision and what you're trying to express, kind of. So keep it as pure as possible.
Yeah, but for me, I think it's also like that I do as little editing basically as possible. It's basically what you did before in the dark room, a little bit color correction, and so like in the end, I think reality makes it always so fun and interesting. Like to include all the strange juxtapositions, all the stuff around it. Like it gives it also like it brings it in the here and the now. Like yeah, where something is. I can remember like when it's like maybe I was lucky in the architectural field to start with Rem Koolhaas because I think he's also always interested in the strangeness of reality and like everything around it, and it's not just about his buildings. So that was for me also like really a moment where which brought me into the architectural field and kind of gave me the confidence to do like what I was always doing, but like apply it to this architectural field to show these kind of things. But for instance, when I first started working with Saga, when she was still there, like she's of course a very different aesthetic of like it's sort of perfect lines and the perfect details and so. And she was working always with Helene Binet, and at some point she asked me also to photograph. So was also these two very contrasting visions of on her work, where Helene did like it's sort of perfect lines, perfect light, like kind of removed from any reality in a way, with fantastic compositions and fantastic photographer, of course. And then I come in with sort of showing all the grittiness, all the shittiness of the city of Rome, of all these sort of conditions which an architect has no control over whatsoever. And at first, like she's asking, like, okay, take that out. Like, no, it's all part of the composition. Like, it's all part of like the places in that reality of the city. So luckily, she understood that and kept working with her. But of course, you see in a lot of architectural photography, it's almost a kind of product photography. Like you have to sell a product from the architect or from the developer or so on. And it becomes very quickly this kind of totally idealized image, removed from reality. But I strongly try to oppose that feeling.
Yeah. But anyway, talking about developers and the relationship with the architect, I was always super interested while working with over the years with photographers. How is the relationship that you have with the client? Who is the client in what case? Is it the developer? Is it the architect? How is your work or the copyright on your work protected? And I'm very curious if you encountered, I don't know, maybe difficult situations, or you already have a strategy while working with these kind of big real estate companies.
Okay. Yes, I usually work with architectural offices, sometimes developers, but mostly architects. But yes, recently, as I put in the presentation, like I was more interested in collaborating with institutions because I felt like I can do more what I want. Also, I think that sometimes having outputs like exhibition and books, you can feel your work more protected in this sense than maybe social network or internet. So it remains something more solid. And I usually try to build a trust relationship with the client. I like to work many times with the same clients also sometimes, because I think you can really learn something between, with them, and they also learn something from you. And I don't know the second part of the question, I don't remember anymore.
Who is the client usually?
Okay.
Yeah, is it the investor? Is it the developer? Is it the architect? Who do you think it should be? Because I know also about situation where the architect is very willing to document his work and so on, but also the client has a different agenda and trying to sell better. And how do you mediate this?
Okay. I have to say that if sometimes happen that the client, that maybe the architect, they know my work, so they want my specific attitude. Maybe sometimes they had, yes, there are also the developer that wants the photos, but they want another kind of style. I say that so they have to choose another person, because I can't do two different type of shooting of the same project. I don't want to, and I think it's better that they can be happier with someone else. So I prefer to leave the job to someone else that can be more useful to them, and so I don't want to change my type of work for just a commercial purpose. So, and I think it's the difficult part, because when you start photographing when you're young, you have to understand this kind of dynamics. So you do more things and different things, and then you learn how to say no and yes to the things. And it's a privilege to arrive to a point you can say no to some stuff, I think.
Trust. You're right about trust being the most important word here, and I think, at least from my experience, people trust the photographer that they choose, and usually it's the architect probably that chooses, depends on the purpose, but I think architects tend to have the authority, even the clients trust them, the clients of the architecture, I mean, everybody else kind of trusts them as the leader of the project, and I think they are trusted also as a decision maker when it comes to how the project gets presented. So I think the client for architectural photography is most of the times the architect. But the approach is the photographer's own, I think. And yeah, there are different approaches for different purposes, and everybody has a different approach, and yeah, people can decide on those criteria who they choose. So yeah.
The power of the architect being the generalist in each project.
Yeah, I think it's a reality probably, at least in my experience. So, and it's a positive. So because we're kind of the same mindset in a way.
Yeah, I think for me, is this? Yes. Yeah, for me, I think my commissioned work is also always an excuse to go to kind of places and discover other things. And of course, there's this kind of divide between what, or sometimes it's a divide, like what an architect or a developer or the client or so needs. Like as a photographer, for me, like you're there for a couple of days, you photograph a project from every kind of possible corner, you discover things. For me, it's also very much a sort of discovery in a place, like what makes a place special. And then sometimes, yeah, you see like what an architect or developer, the client kind of chooses is sometimes kind of the different, more idealized image than what I would choose, which tells, I think, more a story on a place. And I think it depends always a little bit per client, per place, like what comes out of it. And with some, you have a much more deeper relationship. You can propose things. Others, yeah, they are set on their sort of idea. I find it always interesting, like why, like an architect, they or a developer, like they've been with a project for ages. Like it takes so much time, so much effort to build something from scratch. And they think they know every corner, they know every detail. Sometimes they try to influence the photographers, like you should do this, that, and that. Like for me as a photographer, I think the quality is also coming to a place, like for the very first time, that very first impression you have on a place, the things you find stand out on a place, like things you've never experienced before, seen before, moments and so on. And I think to bring out these kind of qualities is also really important. So you try to slip in both. In the end, of course, they're sort of the bread and butter, and they bring you to these kind of places. But that's why I use also like these kind of things, yeah, to explore further and to develop my own projects in these kind of places. And with many of these projects, like from that first excuse to go there, that invitation from an architect, like other things evolve, and that's also like, yeah, you have to be open for like whatever crosses your path.
I think there's a wow factor at the end of a shooting, sometimes when everybody's surprised, like I didn't even think about it that way, or the client or people who are involved in the project. So yeah, even for them it's surprising, like a fresh set of eyes and how they interpret their work.
Yeah, I had this question in my mind actually. I was very curious if you go to the site to photograph with the idea of image that you want to catch, or if there is space for, to leave yourself free to explore on site. I imagine that there can be situations where you receive specific briefs and you know exactly what you have to do, but maybe your personal touch or your whatever you find on site is yours. We have worked previously a lot with Laudian, but also with different photographers. There's still David Dumitrescu, Marius Vasiliev was around, and with each of these photographers, the process of working was different. They needed a different type of briefs and it was very interesting for us to create a way of working with a photographer. So yeah, I'm curious, how is your process, or how do you go on site?
Yeah, for me it's always very lightweight in a way. Like you have, of course, that assignment, that invitation to go there, and then it's, for me, it's really sort of that discovery. I try not to work with briefs or like heavy input from an architect. Like it's about that kind of discovery, and like all these things you cannot plan for, you cannot prepare for, and I think you need to keep that kind of open, and it's very much sort of in the moment, and yeah. Reality is always stranger than what you can imagine before, and I think to bring all these aspects in is really important.
I try to never go in with a preset idea of what I'm going to do. I have my own ways of doing things and my own techniques that I go to, like I like frontal views a lot, and I like to use as long a lens as possible, as the space allows. But I find that if you, for example, studying the light, knowing where you're going and how the light's gonna hit at what time and things like that, that's important to know. So you prepare for that sometimes, if it's relevant. But the actual result, I think, depends on the day. For me, at least, I never try to go with a drawing beforehand or something like that, or at least maybe a mental note, some things that. But if you kind of see at the scene what works and what doesn't, from my experience.
Yes, also for me it's pretty the same. Like I can't plan what I will find there. Sometimes maybe if I know that it's a building in a stereo in a city, maybe I will go to Google Maps to understand better what's near the building and where is the light comes from, to be prepared. But sometimes it happens also that maybe I didn't have the time to go at the hours of the day I want. I had to go to a different hour, and still it was good. I discovered something new. So it's nice to be a bit unprepared, also because I think the feeling of the discovery is like one of the things that like it makes you photograph this thing, like why I click on the camera, because I noticed something, so it's nice to be there and just catch the moment. That's it.
Also notice that when I take more pictures, one after another, or maybe at a time interval, spread throughout the day, later I look at them and it's always the first one that's the best. For me, it's 99% of the time. So you kind of have to trust that first instinct that you have, and then if you try to make it better, you're actually taking away from it. So just leave it and move on to the next one.
Interesting. We can open the conversation to the public. If there are any questions or if you want to intervene, comment, please let us know. Raise your hand. I will come and bring you the mic.
Thank you. I'd like to tell you that I had once a conversation with an anthropologist, and he said that he hates architectural photography because they don't involve people. They are, let's say, only the glorification of the object. What is your attitude in this respect? How do you use people in your...
For me, people are the first thing always. Like, it's also from my background. Like, I never really understood like why architects removed people and all the sort of references to a place, to their buildings. Or like I do understand, like traditionally, architectural photography is kind of this product photography. It's like you try to show that kind of product of an architect in the best possible way, without all its distractions, and it comes in an architectural magazine for architects, and it's like this super enclosed world. So in that sense, like, yeah, it's okay, but like I don't consider myself an architectural photographer also. I think like by showing everything else, what's there, what people do there, how they live there, it creates also, like, photography is about this moment in time, this very particular moment in time, and that makes it interesting. And like to remove all these references, yeah, it becomes product photography, and it caters to a very specific niche and audience, but not much else. And I think, yeah, by including much more and telling a story, actually of what it is, where you are, why it's there, and all these kind of things. Yeah, it makes it also a lot more interesting.
Sometimes I do it on purpose. I wait till there's no people there, and I prefer it that way because for me, a lot of times the suggestion of human existence is enough. It doesn't have to be full of people, or then it depends on what the picture is supposed to show or what you want to show. If you want to see a place in use, then it might be amazing to have a ton of people there and just the market or whatever it is as a background or as a set for the activity, but then the activity itself is the focus of the image. If you want to convey something else, maybe a more stylized photo of a place or of a landscape, people might be distracting, and it's always a choice, I think, and it's a preference, and it depends on the situations. And even if there's no people there, for me, I don't miss them, you know, I don't, the building's for them anyway, so we know, or at the least, we need somebody for scale, right? So.
Yeah, also like mostly of the times I avoid people, but also because I noticed that they still are in the picture also with other things, no? Like you say, like with suggestions, like also Gabriele Basilico, one of the one photograph that I love very much, like he used not so many people but cars and other kind of objects that give the scale of the project, and I think sometimes it's sufficient, like to understand that there's a purpose, a human purpose about this door, a building, also sometimes also a certain kind of light can remember you someone. I don't know, it's always for my romantic way of seeing photography, but so yes, I prefer not to photograph people, but in a certain way I notice that I like to not to avoid objects and other things that can be distracting for some architects, but for me not.
The line between art and documentation, probably, and if you document it, you want to be as real as possible, but if you want to go towards art, you want to take away as much as possible to just convey the simple idea that you want to convey. And I think both the whole line is valid, both approaches, and anything in between. It just depends on the situation.
Yeah, and I think for me, like, people are also crucial because like they tell also a story on the place, like, and very particular architecture also usually involves very particular people, and it's kind of always kind of zooming in and out. Sometimes I have these shots like which are right in someone's face, and like really, and the architecture really disappears, and like it still, like in that series, like it tells completely a story, like why these people live in that kind of place, why they choose that kind of architect, why they choose to live there in a certain condition and so on. And I'm always also amazed, like my work goes back and forth, of course, from commissioned works for architects who are like super excited about their newest project, want to show you the whole thing, show you every detail, invite you in, but then also the kind of projects on like traditional vernacular buildings, like older places, like where architects are largely forgotten or ignored, basically. But you see still the same kind of intensity, and like once you express that interest in these kind of places, you tell people what you're doing there, like they're as excited as an architect to show you their place and like what makes the place special and so on. So for me, I think to include these people and tell those stories is really important.
I think all three presentations was very interesting because you show different type of work. So I have a lot of thoughts about each of them, but I think I would like to go back to the theme of the Biennale of covering softly, and how do you see this, the way you've been inspired by people or by things, or how do you inspire others? Because I think also in architecture it's quite taboo to look at other work, and yeah, I think it's more loose in other fields. And I was just, yeah, how do you see that?
Sorry, I didn't completely understand what the last, like.
Okay, I think it's really related with the exhibition in the sense of that, or it started from the discussion of how architecture, architects are not inspiring from each other, or they're trying not to. They always try to reinvent their own work and bring something new and bring something new every single year, but then it's quite impossible. And I was wondering how you see in photography or in your work, which is a bit more than photography sometimes. How do you, or from where you find inspiration, if it's from other people, or how do you see when somebody looks at inspiration in your work?
I think in most creative professions, like, we're always looking at each other's work, at the world around us, get inspired by different things, but of course try to reinvent certain aspects of it. And I think in architecture you see the same. Like, of course, you see the blatant copying, pasting, like for my series, the Rome, Las Vegas, like all these references which go 2,000 years back, and like they're still valid and they're still getting copied and they're still getting reused and so on, to like all the great contemporary architects who like, yeah, we're all a product of our environment and our living and conditions we live in, materials we see, and I think that's also so fascinating always, of traveling around and stepping into all these different worlds, how vastly different they are, and how things, references kind of also come across all these kind of different environments and are used in different ways. So yeah, like, and at the same time, of course, there's this sort of endless sameness which is coming also over the whole world, where materials are all produced in the same factories. Architecture becomes this kind of use of details from catalogs and getting used all over the world again. And many places you have no clue anymore, like where you are, like it could be anywhere. So I think it goes all these different ways.
Yeah, there's inspiration all around us, I think, and it's impossible to ignore, and you can't not look at anything. And yeah, I think in the end we all have a unique eye, and even if you are a young photographer, and say, and you get inspired by your idols and you try to do the same thing, in the end you won't end up doing the same thing, you'll end up doing something new, just because it's you, even if it's inspired by somebody else. And I think the point is to be inspired and not to ignore what came before you. I think it's more useful to be inspired and to take everything just a millimeter forward with your own trial, right, and error. And I mean, you can't do something that's completely new. And if you want to do the opposite of what's out there, you're still basing it on what's out there. So there's no choice. You just have to do what you do and see what happens. Makes sense?
I have to say that, like, I I don't really care about architecture, like joking, but it's like more or less it's like this, in the sense that of course I prefer to look at that other kind of photography, portrait of other kind of documenting, like documentation. I think it could be useful. And of course, another thing I noticed is that since when I observe less magazines and Instagram and stuff, not because they are not interesting, but I just take avoid to spend too much time on architecture and just live my life without thinking about architecture at all. Maybe sometimes just literature, art, other stuff. Sometimes I evolve, I change, and also my photography can evolve a bit. Because for my mental health, I noticed during COVID, for example, that I was watching too many colleagues and things. I noticed that all are doing the same, and that I went a bit paranoid about maybe I'm not good enough and a lot of stuff. So for that reason, I try to balance. Now I balance in a different way this aspect, and for that reason I say that I don't care about architecture, because of course it's not true, but I think that I would like to see it is just one of the topic like among a lot of topics that could inspire me, and that's it.
To take inspiration from other fields than your own and bring it to your own field. I think that's part of your point, right? And that will create something new.
I think it's like it's a super personal thing in the base. It depends from how you are as a person, I think. I noticed that knowing better myself, I feel like more comfortable and more like health in a mental way to switch a bit more than before. Like, but this is just for me.
Yesterday you had a reference to ChatGPT. I think you had it in the text talk. And now Dacian had a reference to Midjourney. And knowing that it's heavily used in design, I was wondering what's your take on this thing that's gonna change creative work for all creatives.
Should I go? I don't know what to think about it, but I think there's been a lot of revolutions over the last century, and this is one of them, and we don't know what it's gonna do. I mean, what did the gasoline engine do to the horse and carriage? So, yeah, I mean, we see mostly bad in it now, I think, or everybody in the creative field kind of feels threatened and disapproves of this use of technology, and people in the tech world really praise it because they're not actually creating art, but now they can. So I think that's a positive, that people with absolutely no technical skill can still express their imagination, even if it's based on other people's work. So, but we're already seeing kind of a plateau. I think we kind of see the style of AI, and we already see its limit. I don't know, maybe it's gonna evolve, but it's not. Artists are still gonna make art. It's just that probably fewer people are gonna make this type of art that we know today, and a lot more are gonna make kind of the same art defined by this new tool. So yeah, we'll see where it goes. So I've got pros and cons in my head for it. So for me, I'm mostly critical of it, but I know it's unavoidable. It's gonna happen. So yeah, we'll just see what happens.
And I think it's also derivative of everything else what we've seen. I don't know, like I don't really see a use in my practice for that kind of work, but then you see these kind of databases and how these AI mechanisms are trained, and it's like it's slurped up all its content basically from what's being there. Like if I type my name in these databases, like my whole archive basically comes up whatever I've photographed. So it's also kind of scary as a photographer, and like idea of copyright and like how these kind of things, are appropriated and then used in completely different ways.
Yes, I was actually thinking about the practice of Iwan, because I think that he always tells how you can find very specific people in a very specific situation and buildings, and I think this thing is like difficult to replace. I think that reality in some ways it's still better than any imagination possible, right? So, but yeah, like, there's pros and cons. But I'm for now not so worried about it, I have to say.
I don't feel like using it. So I also don't see how I would use it. It feels like I'm not working anymore if I were to generate an image. And I tried the filters that Photoshop has to remove things, or the way it plays with images, and they're just not convincing. It's just not me somehow. So it would feel like somebody else is doing your work in a way.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? We can take one more.
Hi, thank you for being here. And my question may seem a little naive, but it's the best I can get right now. So, what do you do when you cannot catch an atmosphere or a feeling of a place? And were cases when you didn't want to take a picture of a place to keep the feeling to yourself, or you took a picture but you don't want to show it to other people, just to keep that to yourself?
I take a lot of pictures that I don't want to show anybody. Mostly with my phone, mostly for fun, like if I see something funny. But I think ultimately the purpose of photography is to show it, to display it. So, and on the first part about not being able to capture something, it happens to me a lot. That you kind of imagine something in front of. I mean, you never can capture exactly what you see. You always see it more beautifully, I think. It's like when you see a beautiful sunset, the moment you took a picture of it and look at it, it's not that. So, yeah, photography is a bit different than reality. Even if we try to kind of make it as real as possible, it's not really that. So it's you're creating a different thing than, it's maybe more something like you imagine, but it's not the real thing, so.
Yeah, I think photography is also kind of an obsession. Like, for me personally, like you're photographing all the time, and sometimes you have no idea yet why you're photographing that, and it makes sense much later, where it suddenly fits into a series, into a pattern, into like another kind of project comes out of it. So that's also kind of that archive you're building over time, and revisiting sometimes, like, and sometimes like for me, it's also like you're there at that very particular moment in time. Like often I don't come back, like I make a huge trip to be somewhere, so you try to capture as much as possible, and things sometimes make the cut, sometimes they don't, and then you revisit them years later, you go through the archive, and then suddenly it starts to make sense. So there's a whole intuitive process also to it, which you cannot really describe yet beforehand, but I think that's also the interesting part of it.
I usually I have like another approach. Sorry, I was thinking about your answers because okay, later. I usually when I don't find the right way to photograph something, like I'm a bit stuck, I just don't. Like I leave it. Now with the Iwan answer, like it inspired me a bit because it's right. If you do that photos and then maybe years later you see that again, maybe you will see it in another way. So I'm a bit confused now. So thank you. Because usually yes, I try to not to struggle too much, but not because I'm lazy, but because at the beginning I was always trying to find the super right angle. Now I just think that maybe I don't need this picture, maybe it's okay. Also, like that Chian says, like the camera has his limits, the reality and the human eye is different, so it's not a problem if you don't photograph something, also because we have a lot of photographs in the world. But yeah, I still now a bit confused about, so it was kind of, thank you for the question, because in some way, I think you inspire us to think more about the answer of it.
Maybe one example is like in the Rome Las Vegas series, I just showed, like at first I make an exhibition and you make a series of pictures, which is a sequence which kind of works together, and that became that exhibition was at the Academy in Rome, and so and then like a year later or so we started preparing the book, and I first worked with sort of the best of, which were part of that exhibition, but then I felt for the book there was more space, of course. You want to kind of create a different narrative, and you work together with designers, and we went back to the full series again, and also to start to make these kind of juxtapositions, and those were not immediately images which made it into the exhibition, but suddenly together created a completely different story, and there's like really particular moments where also they matched exactly the different environments 10,000 miles apart, but like perspectives, the kind of places, spaces, like they were almost like I couldn't have imagined them before, but I'm glad I captured them, and they suddenly created another kind of reality which made sense for that particular product as a book, but didn't really work for the exhibition first. So it's also like, why you're in that particular place, a particular moment in time, and you try to seize the most of it, and often the sort of ideas come only later when you're sort of the dust settled, and you try to think about it in different ways.
Going back to the previous work that we are doing is always a beautiful introspective exploration of ourselves somehow. And on this particular note, I think we can wrap up this morning and think about our previous experiences in our work. I want to thank you again for being today with us. Thank you for joining for this morning panel and conversation. We will take a 1 hour break for lunch, And we will meet again here with the third and last panel of the jurors from the other 5 categories: Cosmina Guagia, Corbin Cristian, Csaba Nagy, Iva Kucik, and Victor Moldovianu. Thank you, Francesca, Dacian, and Iwan. Thank you all.
Thank you.